Hiring managers of Reddit, what are your nightmare interview stories? I used to manage a Blockbuster, and after one particularly awful interview I walked the candidate out towards the parking lot and the alarms went off. It turned out he stuffed 3 DVDs in his suit jacket before being called back to the office. He did not get the job, or Mamma Mia, Fool's Gold, or High School Musical 3 for that matter. Blockbusted. Was interviewing mechanical engineers for a junior position. Typically we will ask candidates about why or how they left their previous job. A common reason for people to quit is a lengthy commute. One particular candidate informed me that his current commute was too long. How long, I asked. There are 37 traffic lights between my home and the office. He replies. I see, says I. Then he continues unprompted, there are only 15 between my home and your office, so that's much better. I and the other hiring manager laughed our heads off after he left and called him back with a job offer that afternoon. He's a great engineer too. Detail oriented and logical too. Interview went great. Got to last 2 questions about drug test and background search. He said all was great and don't expect any problems. After the interview, during small talk walking to the car, he informed me that he just got out of prison for stealing payroll money from his previous employees at a little over $1 million. I worked as a manager at an ice cream store in high school and staffed the store with other high schoolers. One day a middle-aged man who was the epitome of a drifter, face tattoos, beat up leather clothes, and a big knife on his belt, came in and asked for an application. I obviously wasn't going to say no and handed him one. He proceeded to fill it out in store and turned it in. His previously losted work experience was from a liquor store he worked at for 2 weeks about 10 years ago. Reason for leaving? Got in a fight with my manager. Job before that? Liquor store 14 years ago and worked for a week. Reason for leaving? Differences with my manager. I told him that we weren't hiring right now, which we weren't, but that I would keep his application on file and would call him if something opened up. Sadly, I never got to hire him and learn his hobo secrets. Hobo secrets number 1. Fight with boss. Hobo secrets number 2. Find pig farm in remote area to hide differences with boss. Hobo secrets number 3. Facial tattoos. They're always a good idea. Not me, but my dad told me a great story. He was hiring for a technical position near London. He has one guy come in with an older gentleman. The interviewee was in his mid-30s while the guy with him was mid-50s. This person was apparently his dad. The guy who was actually there to be interviewed never spoke, but the man in his 50s comes in and the first thing he does is start trying to negotiate about pay. He'd come in on the assumption that of course his son was going to be hired, and now they just needed to hammer out the details on what his son was going to get in terms of pay and benefits. My dad told them that if the older man was willing to wait outside he would be happy to restart the interview, but since the interviewee's dad was not going to be working there he had no reason to speak to him. They declined this offer and left. Not really a hiring situation, but it is an initial interview. I was giving one soldier, who had a particularly well-known military surname in these parts, the initial platoon commander interview. I got this soldier to fill out a form with a few stock standard questions that I could ask further questions from. What are your goals in the army? What are your strengths, weaknesses, etc. There was also one particular question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Anyway, PTEX came into the office and sat down. Having answered the above question, Chief of Army, well, frick, PTE, that's a pretty ambitious goal for just 5 years. How do you think you're going to make that happen? Just train really hard. You're not even commissioned yet. That'll take, like, 2 years at least. Do you have to be commissioned to be a chef? You wrote chief. Oh, I just don't know how to spell chef. I interviewed a guy who in the interview did all 3. Comment that I was a woman, and if I was actually his boss, or just an hour desk clerk. Ask if we drug tested, and if so, could he take it in like a week. He should pass then. When I said that we are business casual his response was, well, you would need to provide me with pants, since I only own jeans. I didn't hire him. I am still shocked when I think of how bad of an applicant he was. I think you interviewed Sacha Baron Cohen. I work for a chemical company that hires local college students every semester to do routine lab work for us. We have a fairly constant stream of candidates, but this was by far the worst. The interview in question occurred 3 days before Halloween that year, and coincidentally was the same day as our Halloween office party. Our office manager had hired a psychic for the afternoon events, so when a young woman showed up in black lace, a black corset, black eyeliner, and spider-themed jewelry, we just assumed she was the entertainment. Nope, it was our candidate. Okay, so after the initial awkward exchanges, we rolled with the punches. The non-professional presentation was bad, but not enough to outright dismiss her. Plus it was nearly Halloween, so we let it slide. Got her into the interview room and sitting with some engineers ASAP. After about 30 minutes, a cop shows up and asks if we've seen a girl dressed in all black matching her description. Why, yes, officer, she's here on an interview. Is something wrong? Turns out she had taken a cab to our building but didn't have any cash on hand. So when the cabbie let her out, she decided to do the responsible thing and book it inside without paying. The cop removed her from our building mid-interview, escorted her to the nearest ATM, and made her withdraw cash to pay the cabbie. Then he brought her back and left her with us. My colleague was so completely flabbergasted by the whole thing that she just finished the interview and sent the young thing on her way. She was trying to be Abby from NCIS. I once called a girl in for an interview when I was managing a couple of gas stations. She was well dressed, articulate, and polite. She absolutely nailed the interview and I was extremely excited to have someone who seemed competent and ready to work. Get her set up with her orientation and send her off to one of my stations. I walk in 2 days after she started and she was wearing a strange looking hat, giant, like 4-inch long, mirrored skull earrings, and was blasting rap music out of her phone behind the counter. I gently reminded her of our dress code and asked her to take off the hat, remove the earrings, and it was okay to listen to her music, but only when there were no customers and at a reasonable volume. A week later, I fired her after my manager at the store told me she had witnessed her stealing some cigarettes, begging for food from customers, and requesting breaks every 30 minutes to go smoke. I saw all of it played back on our cameras and just couldn't let it slide. Interviews are crap. I have had the worst looking candidates turn out to be the best workers by far and vice versa. Sounds like politics. I was hiring at a university neighborhood store, and most employees were college students. This one guy showed up 3 hours late. I interviewed him anyways, because it just seemed easier at that point, and I didn't mind killing a few minutes. In the interview, he said that he didn't care about anything other than playing tennis, and shortly afterwards I realized that he was crazy high. Didn't get the job. Classic Pemulis. I interviewed a guy to work as a manager selling internet, home phones, mobiles, etc. The job wasn't overly hard, but you had to memorize a lot of product info that updated or changed completely monthly, and the targets were expected to be met but were impossible to meet. 25 people enter the store in a day, but we are expected to connect 80 services a day. Ridiculous. Anyway, this guy came in and I asked him why he wanted a job. He said, well, I really just wanted something super easy where I could kind of do nothing. I mean, you guys don't look like you work very hard. Also, there are some hot chicks that work here and I'd like to get to know them. I asked him what made him think that the job was easy and he replied, well, the thing is, I'm really freaking smart. I literally looked around to see if I was on some candid camera show. I used to manage a restaurant. The other manager hired a girl from Hooters cause he thought she was cute and all. Well, I am counting the money from the day before and getting the deposit slip all filled out in my office. An employee comes in my office and says she is here for training. I grab the paperwork she needs to fill out and grab my bank bag. I walked up and gave her her paperwork. I realized I forgot a document, so I went back to the office, but I slipped up and left the bank bag on the counter by the register. It was only her and I up there, as this is about 9 AM. Well, I leave and go to the bank to deposit the deposit, and guess what? I am $40 short. So I'm like, frick. I dropped 40 somewhere and head back to work. Can't find it. Ask her if she saw it and she says no. So I watch the security cameras and sure enough the bee opened the bag and stole it. She had literally been there under 5 minutes and stole from us. I called the cops. They came and arrested her. Found 3 pill bottles in her purse, and she had 2 warrants out for her arrest. She was 18 and had been to jail before. She didn't even tear up and called me a dong for calling the cops. TLDR. Girl stole from us before she even filled out her paperwork for employment. Had a guy show up 40 minutes early for an interview, obviously crazy nervous. 30 minutes later me and my team greet the guy, and you could tell by the fantastic handshake the nerves were still there, and this may not go well. Motioned him to the boardroom to do the interview. We sat down and before I had even asked the first question, he had barfed all over the table. Funny thing was he was one of the better applicants, so he did get a call back. Poor guy. It sucks having nerves like that because they are hard to control. I constantly wonder what the people who gave me my worst interview must have thought. I hadn't slept the night before. I was stressed. I was tired. I wasn't in a great mood but I got ready and went there early. They're happy I've arrived. They take me straight in. We're all ahead of schedule. We talk and I've got reasonable answers for all their questions even though I genuinely have very little idea of what the job entails. It's about 16 hours a week. 4 hours every morning from around 6 AM to 10. We get to the what's your weakness question, and sweet Jesus I blew it. I blew it harder than Jenna Jameson in a dong sucking contest. What did I answer? Early mornings. I hate early mornings. I don't sleep well. I don't know what to say. I was exhausted. It was clear to me afterwards that the whole tone of the interview had shifted. This guy had decided I wasn't getting the job. It's true though. I hate early mornings. Father was a cop and worked a ton of overtime. One time that OT included interviewing potential candidates for academy. His favorite interview to tell about was going pretty well, until cop dad. So any history of mental problems? Candidate, nope. Cop dad. Drug use history? Candidate, cop dad, it's fine. If we disqualified everyone who tried a bit, no one could be a cop. Just be honest because this will be asked again with the polygraph. Ever smoke pot? Candidate, a few times back in college. Wasn't really my thing. Cop dad, see usage? Candidate, about 5 minutes before the interview in the parking lot. Cop dad, I'm sorry? Candidate, you know, just to steady the nerves a bit. Cop dad, I think we are done here. We, panel of 3, were hiring for a help desk position. One dude comes in and he is nervous as frick and proceeds to sweat profusely. I have never seen a dude sweat just by sitting down, but there you go. By the end it looked like he had just walked through some sprinklers. He told us at the beginning that interviews made him nervous. Good for him. He knew that this would happen so wore plenty of deodorant and didn't stink out the place. Also good for him. He had worked as a contractor for us before so we knew that this wasn't his normal everyday poor gosh. And good for him. He got the job. Poor guy. I have anxiety that manifests in a different way. It's tough to deal with but shows to his intelligence and forethought how prepared he is. I was put in charge of hiring at a call center years ago. As you probably can imagine, turnover is high. Even if you really want a job, having people yell at you for 6 hours a day will burn people out fast. So basically we hire everyone, except this guy. Pretty much as long as I can understand you during the interview process you have the job. We make people fill out applications but we don't call or check on anyone. So this guy interviews, speaks perfect English, seems nice enough. I ask him about his work history, just making conversation for the most part. I ask him why he left his last job and he responded that he left for stealing credit card information. I don't know why he thought that wouldn't be a red flag for a job where you take credit card information, but at least he was honest. I tell him we'll call him if anything opens up. Did that for 6 months. That was literally the only person who didn't get brought into a training group. Not the hiring manager, but plenty of interviews. It's not the horror stories per se, but the ones that have no business being there are sometimes heartbreaking. I was interviewing for a QA engineer, not a QA tester after the .com bust, but this guy worked for our company before and recently got laid off, so he had priority over any external candidate. He was mid-career, probably rode the .com bubble to a nice house with a monster mortgage payment, a nice car with a huge payment, private school for his kids, thought it would last forever. He did 16 years of manual testing. But frick, We don't pay six-figure salaries for manual testers anymore. I had 30 minutes to ask him a whole bunch of automation programming questions. That was the job we were interviewing for. I even tried to ease it up so that he could answer anything. But he kept saying, with a bit of desperation, "I can learn." I really felt sorry for him because, if you haven't learned how to make your job easier, for example, automation, after 16, I'm not sure you have the aptitude to. He essentially had a kick-butt, easy life for 16 years, and you could see the terror in his eyes as his dream job was ripped away from him with no hope of coming back. He never bothered to keep his skills current, and though he was 10 years old, he really felt like a kid trying to prove something. I knew within 2 minutes he couldn't do that job. Another guy worked on some type of circuit board. Our company was hardware and software. Also laid off. He needed to get a job to stay in the US for visa reasons. But this poor kid didn't know anything beyond this circuit board. Q. How would you test a piece of software? A. Well, in this board, we had these external outputs where we had to check. Q. Okay, but software? A. Well, the board was checked by software. He even spent 10 minutes of the 30-minute interview drawing the board, even though I did not ask. After about 5 questions that referred to this magical hardware board that had nothing to do with anything, I had to say, without mentioning your board, how would you? He looked puzzled, like I asked him to kill his mother, and went back to the board. I really felt sorry for him because he just wasn't really able to answer simple questions. He may have been the greatest hardware developer out there, but had no social skills, and that meant he had to probably pack up and leave the country. I find this fascinating. This is perhaps more of a nightmare than the applicants who are just totally unprofessional. So sad. Thanks for sharing. I did the hiring for a bar that I worked at for a while. Basically, I would do the initial interview, give the owner my thoughts. He would do a quick meet and hire them based on my opinion. I wrote no on several applications, most often because they thought it being a bar, the interview process was casual. I interviewed many people who would swear constantly, or would laugh about how they handled customers who needed to be cut off. One admitted to illegally pouring them only the mixer, no alcohol, then telling them it had alcohol in it and charging them as if it did just so that she didn't have to actually cut them off. Another said she didn't think she could handle working unsupervised. At least a half a dozen of them interrupted the interview to check their phones or answer calls. Bottom line, guys, a bar is still a business. You still need to treat the interview like an interview. I was the only employee for over a month because I couldn't find anyone that seemed like they could handle the job. I finally found one and she and I are good friends now. It's not rocket science, but you do need to show some professionalism. Nothing will compare to the girl who immediately after the interview proceeded to get drunk with her friends at the bar, normally totally okay, and then tried to walk around in her bra. I definitely didn't recommend her. I was hiring at Subway a long time ago, and when the kid thought I wasn't looking, he squirted Chipotle in his mouth. Funny thing is that we were so short-staffed I was still considering giving him a call back, but I ended up just covering the extra shifts myself until a buddy got back from Iraq. Not a manager, but for my last job I read over the resumes and made piles of no's and maybes. Anyway, one of the people put practicing Christian in their other skills section. One put really good at Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Another put the word resume on the center top of their resume. Trump 2020. Keep America great. I've done the hiring manager thing for years, but the event that sticks out for me was when I was frontline lab staff in a very small company. We were hiring and had advertised in the local paper. The lab phone number was published, as it was the only one that was always answered. I took about 50 calls a day for 2 days, wrote down the details of the caller and answered basic questions when the manager wasn't around. My favorites were all the guys who just wanted me to record their names as having called and not pursue the application. They were happy on the dole, didn't want a job, and just wanted me to report back to the unemployment office that they were rejected. I'm a software QA manager. I like to give them an intentionally buggy simple program to see how they approach testing. One girl, supposedly with 5 years experience, asked if there was a way to turn the volume down on clicking the mouse. The physical click you get when you push the button. No further questions. How many of you just clicked the button to see how loud it was? I help hire for a paint store. We had a lady come in once looking for a job, so we scheduled her for an interview. She came in dressed in sweats and an old, stained and altogether disgusting sweatshirt. We started the interview and she immediately launched into how much she enjoyed her previous job as a butcher and how well she could carve up a carcass. She avoided all of our questions about working with people and customer service experience and chose instead to continue providing stories about working as a butcher. It got really awkward because we quickly revised we were not going to hire her, but she continued to share with us her fascination of dead things and their dismemberment. She left at the end of the interview and the manager and I looked at each other and agreed she might come back and be dangerous. Yes, she left us with that feeling. It's hard to honestly sum up how scary it was in writing, but needless to say, we all kept her phone close and the cops on speed dial in case she returned and went ape. This was before I was a hiring manager, but I remember working in fast food and this guy comes into an interview with my boss wearing flip-flops, ripped jeans, and an old t-shirt. I thought my boss was gonna turn him away, but it turns out he's dating her stepdaughter and he got the job. Lost it less than a month later. After I became a manager, the only interview that sticks out to me is this one girl who seemed odd. Not just for the main reason I didn't offer a job. She put her cell phone on the table and it was playing music quietly the entire time I was interviewing her. She put her cell phone on the table and it was playing music quietly the entire time I was interviewing her. Somewhere out there is a Forbes article with the headline 10 different things to do during an interview to relax. Oh god. I had one girl who it was clear was only there because her parents wanted her to get a job somewhere. I'm sitting there, attempting to make conversation. I hire for a fast casual restaurant. It's not like I need their life story. So it's nearly impossible for me to get this girl to have more than a 1 or 2 word response. So I'm to the point where I'm about to be done with this girl and just tell her to leave. Then the store owner walks up to the table. She often sits in on interviews and asks questions that I don't think to ask. She walks up and introduces herself as the store owner. Hello, my name is redacted. How are you? Her response? Whoa, you're tall. My mother was a hiring manager for a car repair shop, and she has quite a few. My favorite is the one that, who after the interview was walking out of the back office still talking to my mom, spotted a rather chubby girl coming into the shop. She says, "You, what a pig." Little did this interviewee, already deemed incompetent as she had asked my mom if they would pick her up for work if needed, know, this chubby girl was my sister. I worked at a UPS store, and on one occasion I was handing out some applications to those who inquired about our help wanted sign. This guy comes in seeming pretty average and asks for an application. I let him fill it out on one of the counters off to the side since it wasn't particularly busy that day, and while he does that he receives a call from one of his friends. He proceeds to catch his friend up on the story about how he's staying with another one of his friends since he recently got evicted from his apartment complex for harassing his neighbors and threatening them when they complained. Needless to say, I tore up his application as soon as he was out the door. Threads like these make me feel like I should be the lord and savior of employers everywhere. Yeah, just getting a reply from sending in an application is almost impossible these days. I'm a recruiter. There was a candidate who sent in a resume for a hard to find skill set. It looked great. He had all the required skills. When I called him and asked him a few questions and wanted him to expand on his skills, he couldn't do it. I'm used to people fabricating their experience and skills, but this guy actually admitted he lied. But my resume says I can. Submit me to your client. I'll get job. I told him there's no way I'm going to submit a fake resume. He then asked if he could refer a friend who could do the job. No, thanks, buddy. I've also had one person do the phone interview for a contract job and then a completely different person show up on site to do the work. The one time a man did the interview and a woman showed up. My favorite was when we were interviewing for a soils tech position. Requires basic math and instruction following. My manager made up a simple test to check basic math and instruction following. I told my manager to add one question to the end. How many grams are in an ounce? One potential employee missed basic math questions like 4x5, but put in 28.35 grams per ounce. Street knowledge. Went to hire a girl for a restaurant I was managing. She showed up for the interview and seemed really off, like she was on drugs or had a few drinks. A short while later the cops showed up asking whose badly damaged vehicle was in the parking lot and questioned some kitchen staff. Next thing you know she sees cops and bolts to the bathroom. The police had to go in and grab her. When they searched her they found a half-empty bottle of vodka and some pills of some sort. She was arrested and escorted out of the restaurant. Apparently on her way to the interview she sideswiped another vehicle. Needless to say we never saw her again. 2 incidents that stand out different candidates for the same job. 1. Me. What would you say is your single most impressive professional achievement? Him. I no longer have a colostomy bag. 2. Me. This job is quite prominent and may require you to give presentations to senior government figures. Can you tell me how you approach this kind of pressure? Him. You've got to be joking. I'll be off sick that day. Latest one. Dude turned up an hour late for the first interview. I thought well crap happens to everyone and gave him 10 minutes as a courtesy and rescheduled. He was 2 hours late for his second interview. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.